Hi, my name is Louis Reich. I'm the Director of International Student Services, and I'd like to welcome you to the International Student Presentations on Immigration and College Culture as part of New Student Orientation 2020. Welcome to those of you watching online, wherever you are. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Today we're just going to go over a couple things, the immigration regulations that will be dictating your stay in the United States while you're here, and also some college culture and JU culture information that you'll find helpful when you arrive on campus. A little bit about me. Like I said, my name is Louis Reich. I'm the Director of International Student Services. This year will be my 8th year at Jacksonville University. And my office is on the 3rd floor of the Davis Student Commons. That's the building with Chick-fil-A. My contact information will also be provided at the end of the presentation. So if you have any questions about anything you see or hear during the presentation, please feel free to reach out to me. But let's get into it. I think the thing we probably need to talk about first is what's happening with COVID and the travel restrictions. As of right now, so today is Thursday, July 23rd. So as of today, the regulations are pretty much as follows. There are some legal restrictions on traveling from the United Kingdom and the Schengen area, as well as China, Brazil, and Iran. The most recent updates on that are that travel from the United Kingdom and the Schengen are allowed under a national interest exemption that must be applied for at the same time that you apply for your F1 visa. As an incoming student, if you're transferring from another F1 or I-20 granting school, you should be able to return to the US. But if you're making your first trip over on an F1 visa, make sure you're applying for that national interest exemption during your visa appointment, whenever that is. If you're in China, Brazil, or Iran, it's a little bit more complicated. Direct travel from those places to the United States is not permitted right now. If you've been in China, Brazil, or Iran in the last 14 days, you're going to have to find another way to get to the United States. Some people have been flying to intermediate countries and then staying there for 14 days and then coming to the US. That may or may not work depending on what your options are. So I would recommend, if you're in one of those countries and travel restrictions are an issue, please let me know right away, and we'll work on a plan to get you enrolled and make sure you're a part of the community as quickly as possible. For everyone returning from international travel, a 14-day period of self-quarantine is required. This is the Centers for Disease Control directive. This is not a JU policy. This is not something we have control over. Even if you've provided a negative test, even if you're coming from someplace where there are few or no cases, that self-quarantine is required. Planning travel can be a big issue, even for United States outlying islands and outlying territories. Just being able to get to and from the places you want to get to via plane or boat, or however you're traveling, land borders being closed. So make sure you're planning your travel far in advance and that you're buying cancelable, refundable, or changeable tickets so that you're not out money if something happens that causes your travel plans to change unexpectedly. You might have heard at the beginning of July, there was some guidance that was gaining a lot of media attention from SEVP and Homeland Security. That guidance has been reversed, but we haven't received the official notice as to what that reversal means. And some of the previous guidance that we're working on applies differently to new students than it does to incoming students. So if you're brand new coming in, waiting for your visa appointment, please let us know. You should have received an email from me already with some information gathering tools, a survey, so that you can let us know what your plans are. But please feel free to reach out to me about any questions or changes in plans. We also know that it's hard to get an F1 visa right now with suspension of consular services at consulates and embassies throughout the world. Actually acquiring an F1 visa right now can be problematic. My best advice for that is get the soonest appointment you can. It's easier to change an appointment once you have an appointment than it is to get one from scratch. So as soon as you can get an appointment, even if it's not till September, even if it's not till October, go ahead and get the soonest appointment you can. As far as late arrival goes, if you're coming into the country later than the first day of classes, that's fine. We have provisions in place to help with that. Just make sure that you are reading your email and applying for and enrolling in classes that are going to facilitate that. If you're coming in, if you plan to come into the United States at some point during the term, you cannot be enrolled in fully online courses. You're having to take a mixture of hybrid courses and online courses. And finally, if you're deferring to spring semester, we're bummed. We totally understand. Deferring your arrival to spring semester and deferring your admission to spring semester are two different things. So make sure you're chatting with me, your admissions officer, your academic advisor. There are a ton of people who can help answer your questions and determine which option is right for you to make sure that you are getting what you need. You're getting the support from me, from our team. We're here to help. We're here to answer questions. So if you have questions, please, please, please just reach out to us and let us know. In terms of COVID, obviously, one of the things that we talk about in this presentation is cultural norms and what it means to be studying in the United States, living in the United States, having a roommate, maybe for the first time, or maybe having a roommate from a different culture than you. International students, we do sometimes see that they struggle with adjusting to cultural norms in the United States. But with COVID, a lot of the health related requirements are going against what our traditional cultural norms are. So just as an example, it's traditional when meeting someone for the first time to shake their hand. I wouldn't do that right now. So this is very different for everyone. Please know that you're not alone. You're not the only person who thinks that this is awkward. You're not the only person who thinks it's unusual to be wearing a mask or to not be able to go into someone's room. We know that this is strange and we're here to help, but ultimately your health and safety should take priority over politeness. So whether it's wearing a mask or shaking hands or socially distancing, your health and safety and the health and safety of the JU community should be the #1 priority. Our domestic students are learning this as well. And don't feel bad. Like I said, feel free to ask questions. Feel free to ask questions of students. Feel free to ask of your orientation leader, your RA. We're all happy to help. And make sure that you follow instructions about hygiene and distance and masks, even if they run counter to what your cultural norms are or what you think the US cultural norms are. Make sure that you're putting your health and safety as the #1 priority. With that, let's talk about immigration and visas proper. So if you're watching this, it's very likely that you have come or will be coming to the US specifically to attend Jacksonville University or another institution of education. If you're planning to complete your degree, you're likely on or waiting for an F1 visa. This is a standard student visa. If you're not on an F1 visa, let me know. If you're not planning to be on an F1 visa, let me know as well. I'm not a government officer. I want to make sure that we know why you're here, how you're here, and do what we can to keep you safe. But ultimately, if you have your passport on you, you can check to see if your visa is F1, or if you have an appointment to get an F1 visa, then you're an F1 student by my record keeping. If you don't have your visa yet, that's okay. Like I said, take the next consulate or embassy appointment that you can get. It's important to get the visa. And even if you're from a country where you can just enter the United States directly without a visa, like Canada, or you can get visa on arrival, which a lot of countries can do. A lot of countries' passports allow you to just come here and get a visa on arrival. Those are not student visas. Those are tourist visas generally. They're temporary and they do not allow you to take a course load while you're here. So don't just come and figure you'll sort the visa thing out later. Applying for change of status within the US takes a long time, and applying for a US visa within the United States is more or less impossible. Even renewing a visa requires you to leave the country. So don't just show up and expect that you're going to be able to figure it out, because the system's not designed to work that way. You're much better off enrolling in hybrid courses and waiting for a visa appointment. If you're not here on an F1 visa, let's chat. If you're here on a J1 visa, welcome. J1 visas are more for exchange students. So if you're coming here only for 1 or 2 semesters, you're not enrolling full time, you're part of a partner exchange program from a foreign institution, and that institution that's not in the United States will be granting your degree. You're likely on a J1 visa, and I'll try to make provisions throughout the presentation to talk about what J1 visas do. But we have, by my count, about 300 F1 students and maybe 4 or 5 J1 students this term. So most of what I'm talking about is going to focus on F1 visas. If you have specific J1 questions, reach out to me, and if I can't answer your questions, I'll direct you to someone who can. CVIS. You'll hear me talk about CVIS. You'll hear someone say CVIS or SEVP. I've already used it once in the presentation without acknowledging what it is. SEVIS is the Student and Exchange Visitor Information System. It's a database. It's the government database run by SEVP, which is the Student and Exchange Visitor Program. SEVP is run by Homeland Security. So when I say DHS or SEVP, I'm referring to the program. When I say SEVIS, I'm referring to the database. All schools that allow F1 or J1 students to attend have a SEVIS database and access. So there are certain people at JU and at any other school that can log into SEVIS and see some information about you. It's also where we update information about you when things change. So if you move, your address changes. If you get an employment authorization, which I'll talk about employment shortly, but come talk to me, don't just get a job. If you change your major, if you or lengthen your program, if you change from bachelor's to master's, master's to doctor, anything like that, or if your status changes from active to on sabbatical, let us know. We need to report those changes in SEVIS. For you, failing to report those changes can result in deportation. It's not often that that actually happens, but it is something that the government has the option to do. So especially those things marked with a little asterisk, if you change your address, if you change your major, or you need to extend or shorten your program, you need to let us know immediately. Address changes must be reported within 10 days. Academic major changes must be reported within 10 days. And if you need to extend your program, we need to know 15 days before the program end date. So when you get your I-20, look at it. There's a program end date on it. If you ever need to extend that date, I need to know before that date. If you come to me 15 days before, I can just type in some stuff into SEVIS and create you a new I-20 with no problem. If you come to me after the end date, there's almost nothing I can do and you will have to leave the country. They do take it very seriously. They don't want people overstaying their visas. So please make sure you let me know of any changes to any of this information right away. If I ever refer to things like your immigration documents, generally what I'm referring to are these 3 or 4 things. Your passport probably has your visa in it. It also has an expiration date, as well as your visa having an expiration date, and those don't often match up. So some weird things can happen as a result of that. Let's say you get your visa stamped into your passport, then your passport expires and you get a new passport. You now have to travel with both passports because they can't physically move your visa from one passport to another. So make sure you know that and don't accidentally forfeit your passport with a valid visa in it. Your passport also has to be valid for at least 6 months from any given day while you're in the United States. So if you know your passport expires on June 1st, 2021, on January 1st, 2021, your passport is less than 6 months from expiring, and therefore you're technically out of status with the US government. So make sure you give yourself plenty of time to do passport renewals. Some countries, it's very easy to renew your passport while you're in the United States. Some it's not. Some countries send a passport van around to all their consulates throughout the country, and you can get one within a couple weeks and they'll come right to you and they'll mail it to you. Some countries, or yeah, depending on where you're from, you might have to travel to New York or Washington, D.C. or Houston to get a new passport, and it can take a long time. So just make sure you're staying on top of that and never get rid of your older expired passport if it's got your visa in it. The other thing that we'll talk about is your Form I-20. It's the form that has the big F1 in a square at the top. A lot of people think it's their F1. It's not. It's called a Form I-20, and it's important to distinguish between those two. You are issued or will be issued a Form I-20 upon your admission to JU. That is how you get into the country. Your visa in conjunction with your I-20 are what allows a customs and immigration officer to give you free passage into the United States. If you don't have an I-20 or your I-20 isn't properly endorsed, there's a chance that you'll be turned away at the border, or that you'll be let in under a conditional and provisional status, which will make it very hard for you to come or go at a later time. And it requires a lot of administrative work for us to correct. So try to avoid that if at all possible. Anytime you enter the United States, you will get an I-94 record. That's a record of admission. Anyone who's ever come in has an I-94 number, and your I-94 number changes each time you leave and re-enter the United States. So every time you leave and re-enter, so when you come in for the first time, or if you're already here, this is a good reminder, just Google "get my I-94" and you'll be directed to a Homeland Security website where you can download and print, if you have a printer, your I-94, but at least download it and keep the record of your I-94 number. And remember that that number is going to change if you leave. That's an important thing to have. You'll need that when applying for OPT, if you want a social security number, if you want a driver's license, you're going to need your I-94, because in addition to giving you your entry record number, it also clarifies and confirms that you are here in F1 status. So if you check your I-94 and you see that you've been admitted in visitor status instead of F1 status, that's something we need to change right away. It might not be anything you've done. It might have just been that the Customs and Border Patrol person entered your information incorrectly and put you in the wrong status. If we find out about that, we can change it. But if we don't find out about it, there can be long-term ramifications. So make sure you check your I-94 every time you enter the United States. It's a really important record-keeping thing. If you're an exchange student and you're here on a J1 instead of an F1 visa, you won't be issued an I-20, you'll be issued a DS 2019, but it works more or less the same way. Something I want to clarify, because a lot of people get this mixed up, F1 visa and F1 status cannot be used interchangeably. Having an F1 visa doesn't necessarily mean that you have F1 status. And having F1 status doesn't necessarily mean that you have a valid F1 visa. So the visa is what allows you to enter. It's like having a key to a house. And the status is what actually allows you to be there, like having permission to come over. So for instance, if you give a friend the key to your house and say, hey, I'm going out of town, can you pet sit for me? You give them the key. That doesn't mean that 5 years later, they can just come in without permission and use that key to come into your house when you're not there. The visa and the status work slightly differently. So for instance, if you come into the country without showing your I-20, you'll be able to come in, but you'll probably be able to come in either on a provisional status or on a visitor status. That means that you have a visa, but not your status. If you come in status and then you don't follow the rules of your F1 visa, so you don't take a full-time load of classes or you violate a US law, then you lose your status. So there are ways you can have the visa and not the status. The other thing is, once you come in F1 status, as long as you do the things you need to do to maintain your status, the status is valid, and that's true even if the visa expires. So if your visa expires on July 24th, 2020, but you're flying into the US today, even though your visa expires, you're fine to stay in the United States legally as long as you maintain your F1 status. So just make sure you understand and know the difference between that. And your Form I-94, which I talked about previously, is what shows you your status. So if you search Get My I-94, you'll see what status you're in the country in. As long as it's F1, you are good. As long as you keep taking classes, as long as you maintain satisfactory academic progress, as long as you don't break the law, you're fine to stay in the country, even if the visa expires. Other things about maintaining status: you have to make sure that you have 6 months left on your passport at all times. If you don't, your status could be revoked. Do not work without authorization. This is a huge thing. Most places will not allow you to work if you don't have a social security number anyway, and you need to talk to me to get a social security number. But there are some restrictions as to what jobs you can and can't have and when you can start looking for and getting jobs as an international student. I'm happy to discuss those. I'll touch on them briefly in this presentation, but do not start work without authorization. Talk to me first. If you're offered a job, if someone asks you if you want to get a job, even if it's a job on campus, even if it's a job as an RA, just come talk to me first to make sure that we're doing everything by the book. Failure to report change of address can put you out of status. Not being a full-time student, which is 12 hours per term for undergraduates, that's fall and spring terms, 6 hours for graduate students. If you're not taking a full-time load, we can take some steps to try to hold your status and report it properly. But if you just drop a class down to 11 hours and don't report it to me, and we can't get you into another class, it's possible that you will lose your status. Filing your income taxes every year. We'll talk about taxes briefly. As an F1 student, you have to file your federal income taxes every year. Even if you don't have to pay anything, you still have to file them. Keeping accurate program dates and requesting extensions as soon as you know that you'll need them, like we talked about, and making sure that your I-20 is signed and that you have the proper travel authorization for coming back into the country. On page 2 of your I-20, there's a box with 4 sets of horizontal lines. That's the travel endorsement lines. Anyone who works at JU who is a DSO can sign those. So the people who you haven't met yet, but you will probably soon, myself, Miss Terry, Terry Bush works on the third floor, the same floor that I work on. Christy Gover can sign. Ilona, who is probably most of your admissions officers, can sign, but that's about it. So you can't just have anyone sign that. It has to be some specific people, but making sure that that is signed when you're about to leave the country so you can come back in and maintain your status. Taxes. This is a get questions about every year, so I've decided to include a slide on it this year. Some of you probably don't pay taxes at home, and so taxes are compulsory financial charges paid to a government and used for public expenditures. So they're not optional. You have to pay them if you owe them. There are a couple different types of taxes. The most common are sales tax and income tax. So in sales, for sales tax, when you go to the store and you pick up a thing that you want to buy and you look at the price and it's $9.99, that does not include Jacksonville's 7% sales tax. So if you buy something that's advertised at $9.99, you'll actually pay $10.69. This is very common. It's used by local governments to make money for things like schools, infrastructure improvements. Then there's also income tax, which is a progressive tax levied depending on how much you earn. So if you have a job, you're earning money, you have to pay income tax on that. And that can include money from just having a regular job, also selling stocks and bonds. Depending on how much money you're earning from financial aid and scholarships, your scholarships might be taxable. You can also, if you own a house and you rent it, you have to pay taxes on that. There's lots of different ways to do that. And that is federal income tax. Federal income tax has to be filed every year. That doesn't mean you have to pay taxes every year. Filing just means that you calculate how much money you owe to the government or how much money they owe you, because that does happen sometimes. And then submitting that information to the government and saying, I don't know anything, here's the proof, here's my math. Or saying, here's how much I owe and here's a check for the amount, or here's how much you owe me and here's my bank account information so you can pay me what I'm owed. There are laws in the United States, just like practicing law, pretending to be a lawyer and not, or being a doctor without a license. I can't give tax advice and no one can give you tax filing advice without proper licensures. So there are some companies that allow you to ask questions and collect the information that you need in order to pay the correct amount and file properly. Sprint tax is one, Glacier tax is another. They charge a nominal fee, usually in the neighborhood of 40 to 50 US dollars, and they handle all of the paperwork and everything for you and allow you to ask questions and talk to a licensed professional. So that's something that we typically encourage our international students to do. Traveling outside the US, I would just plan not to right now. This is not the time to take a cruise. This is not the time to visit another country recreationally. I would limit travel outside the US unless you absolutely have to. If you're planning to return home for winter break, you probably want to start looking now to see what the laws and restrictions for your home country and any country you'll be traveling through are, to see if there are any restrictions that would complicate your return home. But generally speaking, when you are leaving the United States, it's really easy. It's easy to leave as long as you have a passport that's valid to get you into the place where you're going, and either a VOA or you're going back to your home country. It shouldn't be a problem. What can complicate things is when you're coming back. When you're coming back into the US, you need to make sure you have an unexpired visa. And again, if your visa is expired, you have to renew it outside the US. So plan for this. We've had students in the past who their visa was expired. They knew that they were going to need to come back in at some point, but they weren't going to have time while they're out of the country. So they actually traveled to Canada or Mexico or the Caribbean and got their visa renewed there, because you cannot renew the visa inside the US. You'll also need your valid Form I-20 with a travel authorization. We encourage you to get the travel authorization signed every time you travel outside the United States. That probably won't be often this term, but if you're leaving the country every week, again, that's going to create problems in other ways. But if you're leaving the country often, you don't have to get it signed every time, but at least let us know that you're traveling every time and what your travel authorization date was. That way we can tell you if you need a new travel authorization signature. For J1 students, it's not the I-20, it's the DS 2019. You need your unexpired passport, and it must have 6 months left before it expires. You can often renew your passport here in the US. You can renew it at home. A lot of times it's a lot easier to renew it at home, but if your passport is expired, it can complicate traveling. So if you need to renew it here, I don't know what every country's process for passport renewal is, but I'm happy to help you try to find out. Protect these documents, even the old ones. There are going to be times where you're called on to produce all of your I-20s. So make sure, I recommend you just get a file folder and you put all of them in there. You mark the one that you're traveling with and you put it next to your passport in a laminated document sleeve, and you keep the rest of them in a folder and you keep that somewhere safe. That's true of passports, I-20s, DS-2019s. Anytime you're issued new travel documents, hold on to them. On-campus employment. After you've been on campus for 1 full year, so that's a fall and a spring, you're able to work on campus in certain jobs. So in order to do that, this won't apply to you now, but just so you know what you need, you'll need a social security card, which you have to get some paperwork from me, a letter from your supervisor, a letter from me, and have your valid passport, I-20 or DS-2019 and I-94, and go to the Social Security office and present all that, and they will issue you a Social Security number and a Social Security card. Once you have that, you're eligible to work as long as you are in the United States, as long as the job you're working is an on-campus job, and as long as you're upholding your minimum GPA and working no more than 20 hours a week during the terms and 30 hours a week during term breaks like winter break or summer break. If this is something that's interesting to you, let me know. You shouldn't need to work in order to pay for school. If you do, we probably need to have a conversation. But if you're interested in a work study job, or you just want to have a little bit of walking around money after a year, let me know. We can talk you through that process and what your options are. The other way to get authorized to have a job is through curricular practical training. This is designed for students to have paid or unpaid internships. You still have to wait that 1 full year, and the internship must be directly related to your major, and you have to receive internship credit for it. So JU tracks internships, and you have to have a credit-bearing internship. That's to make sure that it really is curricular, that it's directly related to your curriculum, and it's not just a job. There's 3 ways you can get credit for an internship. You can either take an internship course, which is a special course designed to allow you to earn school credit for taking an internship. The second way is if you're taking a regular course. Let's say you're taking a marketing course, and in the syllabus it says one of the requirements of this course is that you have an internship or other practical hands-on learning experience. If you can provide me that syllabus, then that's a curricular internship and would be approved. And the last way is for you to get an independent study. This is a tool that we use to allow students to explore topics that aren't necessarily offered in a particular class, but are related to their major and are important for their learning. You do have to have a professor approve and supervise that. So this is the least common way. Most students are doing those first or second options. They're either taking an internship course or they have a class which requires them an internship. This is usually a part-time experience, 20 hours a week maximum. The first reason is if you have a full-time internship, it can disqualify you from getting OPT later on, and most students consider OPT to be a more valuable experience. The second reason is it can just look bad if you're trying to apply for a green card or citizenship later on, if you have a lot of full-time work experience while you're here to be in school, because that's what your F1 visa is. It's a student visa. It can just look bad and raise a lot of red flags. So I very rarely approve and never encourage someone to seek full-time employment through CPT. There's a lot of employment documents that you need in order to apply, but if you are looking at an internship or are offered an internship or need to take an internship for a course, come see me and we'll give you all the information that you need. The other way is optional practical training. This is what most students consider to be the most valuable job experience. It allows you to have a job after you graduate. And for most of you, getting a job after graduation is going to be able to earn you a lot more money, a lot more experience, positive references. And for some people, even give you a company that will sponsor an H-1B visa. You're going to be more valuable once you have that bachelor's degree or master's degree in hand. And so employment after graduation can be more lucrative. OPT allows you 12 months, up to 12 months of employment authorization for employment or unpaid internship or volunteering. You can start applying 90 days prior to your I-20 completion date, and I recommend that you apply on or close to that 90 days before, because it can take a while for this to process. Unlike CPT, which I approve, OPT is approved by US Citizenship and Immigration Services, so you have to mail it off to them in Texas, and it's a whole big process. Once you get approved, the employment has to be directly related to your major. If it's not clear how the job is related to your major, it could raise red flags. So I would get a letter from your employer explaining how it's related and keep it. So for instance, if you are an engineering major, you get an engineering degree, and then you get a job as an engineer, that makes perfect sense. If you get a job in marketing with an engineering major, you're probably going to want some sort of documentation to demonstrate how it is that that is directly related to your engineering major. Come see me, meet me, Zoom me, Skype me, whatever you need to do if you have questions about this. But this is for post completion. So most of you who are watching this are probably years away from this being something that you need to think about. If you have questions, if you lose or think you're going to lose your full-time status, if you are failing a course and the instructor tells you to withdraw, but that's going to put you below full-time, if you change your major, if you change your minor, if you change your address, if you have any other questions, come talk to me. Ms. Terry, myself, Christy Gover, the Dean of Students, we are not government employees. So if you come to us and say, hey, I think I might be in danger of losing my status, my answer is almost never going to be, well, prepare to go home then. My answer is going to be, let's see how we can keep you here. When you come to JU, you're part of the JU family, you're part of the JU community. I have no interest in sending somebody home. If I wanted to go work for ICE, I'd go work for ICE. I don't want to do that. I want to help you. I want to serve the students. So if you have questions, if you have something that comes up and you're like, Lewis didn't talk about this, come talk to me. If I don't know the answer, I can find it, or I can help you find somebody who does know it. This is my contact information. I'll put it back up on the screen at the end of the very end of the presentation. But again, my name is Lewis Reich. I'm the Director of International Student Services. That's my email address. That is an LRATTIN@ju.edu. That is my phone number. I also can do Skype, Zoom, Microsoft Teams if you have that. I'll FaceTime you. I'll WeChat you if I need. I'm here to help you. I'm here to serve you. I want to be able to help you and connect with you in whatever ways are meaningful. I do have an office on the 3rd floor. Because of the restrictions having to do with COVID, I'd prefer that you only come to my office on the 3rd floor if you need a physical document or you need to give me a physical document. There are free scanner apps for most smartphones that will allow you to turn a photo into a PDF. That's how I prefer to do document processing. But if you need a physical signature on your I-20, I can do that. If you need a new I-20, if you need to give me employment paperwork, if you need to pick up something for a Social Security card, I can do all of those things from my office. But other than that, just call me or email me and I'm happy to set up a time to meet virtually. We're now going to move on to a presentation which I actually like a little bit better, which is American and college culture. This is a little bit about JU. This is a little bit about the United States. This is a little bit about what it's like to be in college. If you're coming here, I assume you have some idea of what college in the US looks like. And depending on where you got that notion, you might be in for a little bit of a surprise. College is not like the movie Animal House. College is not like the movie Old School. It's very different than how the media portrays it. And as you probably know, if you're making an assumption about someone or something or some experience based on something other than your own experience, there's a chance that your assumption is going to be incorrect. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a more realistic idea of what it's going to be like to get here, because culture shock is real. And I want you to know what it is that you're in for. This is not to scare you. It shouldn't scare you. It should reassure you. If it doesn't, send me an email. I'm happy to modify the presentation in the future. But again, if you have questions about any of this, let me know, and I'm happy to go over it one-on-one or in a smaller group. But I do want to talk about a couple things that I think are important before you arrive. Rules and laws. So rules of being at JU, and then laws of the United States. Some terminology that you might hear. I remember when I first started at JU, everybody was talking about decob, and I didn't know what it was, and I was too afraid to ask. And so one day I finally asked someone, and they're like, oh, it's just the name of that building over there. But I didn't know, and I didn't want to ask. So I don't want you to be in that situation. So I'm going to give you the common terminology and abbreviations. But if you have another one that comes up, let me know. So we're going to talk a little bit about personal space, comfort, and privacy, how to treat public spaces, what the weather is like here, dress, hygiene, cooking, dining, what resources you have as a student. And then if you're here in the session live, You can ask questions. If you are watching this recorded after the fact, you can contact me with questions and I'll put my email address and everything back up on the screen. So let's talk about rules and laws. To be in the United States is to understand and adhere to and agree to adhere to the laws. For any of these rules or laws, I'm an international student, I didn't know, or I'm an international student, the rules are different in my home country, is not a valid excuse for not following the rules or laws. Ignorance of a rule is not an excuse for violating it. So as we talk about alcohol, in the United States, you must be 21 years of age or older to purchase or consume alcohol. If you go to a restaurant, if you go to a bar to order a drink, I mean, that's going to be discouraged during COVID. I mean, going in and eating in somewhere carries a risk. But if you're trying to purchase alcohol anywhere for any reason, even at a store that sells it, you will very likely be asked for government identification to purchase that alcohol. If you're 21 years of age or older, no problem. You might get a weird look if you provide a German passport to try to purchase alcohol, but you can. They might just have a manager come over and look at it, but being carded is a pretty common thing. You can get a US ID card, a state of Florida ID card, but it'll say pretty clearly your age, and if you're under 21 and you provide that, you're not going to be able to purchase alcohol. On campus, we have an additional restriction, which is that students under the age of 21 may not be in the presence of alcohol. So same room on campus, same apartment on campus. So if your friend is of age and you're underage, they invite you to their room and there's alcohol there, you have both violated the rule. That's something that you can be fined for. You can face disciplinary action within the university. If you're of age, there are limited quantities of alcohol that you may have. Check with your RA or check the JU Green pages or the housing contract, and you'll be able to see what those rules and restrictions are. If you're underage, it is your responsibility to check and make sure that you're not putting yourself in a position where there is going to be alcohol present. And if you're of age, it is your responsibility to make sure that you're not inviting your underage friends into a place where you're both going to be in violation of the rules. The rules are spelled out pretty clearly, but there are also residential advisors who will be able to answer questions about this for you. I know it can be kind of difficult to understand, but if you're not old enough to drink, just stay away from alcohol. It's not like the movies where everybody's drinking all the time. Underage drinking is not nearly as common as it's made out to be, and it is, in addition to a violation of the rules here at JU, it is also illegal. And if you're drinking underage, you're risking your visa. Same thing with smoking. New laws in the United States passed recently mean that you have to be 21 years of age or older to purchase or consume tobacco or e-cigarettes or vapes or hookahs or what have you. On campus, those products are prohibited completely. You cannot smoke, you cannot vape on campus at all, even outside, even far away from a building, even in your own car. It is not allowed. We are a smoke-free campus, so if you are a smoker, take that into account. You're going to have to walk off campus in order to use tobacco or smoke products. So just don't do it on campus. There are pretty hefty fines, and you can go face the disciplinary process for that as well. As far as drug use, most common recreational drugs are illegal in the United States. Marijuana, heroin, cocaine, ecstasy, amphetamines, LSD, opium. Just don't do drugs. It's not legal. It can absolutely threaten your status. You can also be suspended or removed from Jacksonville University. That's sort of your best case scenario. Your worst case is that you could actually face jail time here in the United States. This is not something you want to mess around with. Just don't use drugs. Marijuana specifically, marijuana is in a state where some US states and territories are legalizing it for recreational or medical use. In Florida, medical marijuana is legal, but federally, marijuana is a Schedule I drug, which means that it has been deemed to have no medical value by the US federal government, and they are the ones who prosecute drug crimes. They're the ones who handle your visa. If the people who have issued your visa and the people who are issuing your I-20 are telling you that you shouldn't do this, you probably shouldn't do it. So just don't use marijuana, even if you think it's legal, even if your friend says it's legal, even if your friend says they have a way to get it. Don't. You're absolutely threatening your status in the United States, and you're threatening your future at JU. On a little bit of a lighter note, Let's talk about names and titles. Depending on where you're from, this might be a little different than what you're used to. Um, so for me, my first name is Lewis. That is my first name or my forename or my given name. My middle name is Stephen, and my last name or my family name or my surname is Reich. So it's proper, it's common for you to call students, other students, by their first name. So if I was in your class and we were working on a project together, I would probably call you by your first name and you would probably be calling me Lewis. If someone is older on staff, if they're your professor or faculty member, usually either Mr. for a man or Ms. or Mrs. for a woman, and then their last name. Or if they are a professor, maybe Professor Reich or Dr. Reich. I'm not a doctor or a professor, but just as an example. Usually people older than you or an authority are called by their title or Miss or Mr. And then their last name, and classmates, roommates, teammates are called by their first name. And nicknames are common here in a sign of affection and not disrespect, unless someone is giving you an obviously mocking nickname. They're probably trying to be friendly with you and give you a fun nickname. So if you have questions about what to call someone, the best thing to do is to ask them, hey, what should I call you? I have a lot of people who call me Mr. Reich, and I prefer Lewis. Just if you meet me on campus, Lewis or Mr. Lewis is fine. But generally, among all of these rules and best practices, your best bet is to call someone what they ask you to call them. That's the most polite and respectful thing to do. So if someone introduces themselves to you as Lewis, call them Lewis. If they introduce themselves to you as Professor Reich, call them Professor Reich. But treat people the way they want to be treated generally. Let's talk about Jacksonville as a city. By American standards, Jacksonville is very large. We are the largest city in the 48 continental United States by land area, although not by population, not by a long shot. The city is divided up into a lot of different neighborhoods or boroughs. So you might hear someone refer to the west side of Jacksonville. That's basically anything on the west side of the river, the north side, or the south side. You get into a situation where it's hard to give a distinct separation. Trying to say, oh yeah, the south side is anything south of a certain landmark can become complicated. So even more than that, it's divided down into smaller neighborhoods. So for instance, the Arlington neighborhood is where JU is. There's also the beaches, there's Riverside, there's San Marco, there's downtown. I'll show you a map very shortly of all of Jacksonville. And the thing that you'll see is that there's a lot of very different distinct neighborhoods that have different subcultures, that have different architectures, that have different shopping and living experiences. So make sure you familiarize yourself when you come here. We also have 80,000 acres of city and state parks within Jacksonville. It's very common to go to a park. I mean, I live about a 2-minute walk from a very large city park that has soccer fields and baseball and softball fields and a public golf course. And I take my dog walking there. It's a really nice place. And there are a ton of parks all over the city. There's a lot of parks. A lot of the beaches are state parks and city parks. So make sure you know, some beaches charge admission, some state parks, it costs you money to park. So if you're trying to go to a park, make sure that you know what it is, if it's going to cost anything. Attractions, there are a lot of attractions around Jacksonville, although they are probably going to be affected by COVID. So for instance, you probably, if you know one thing about Jacksonville, know that we're the home of the Jacksonville Jaguars, the National Football League team. I don't know what the NFL season is going to look like this year. It's going to be very different. It's very common for JU students to go to Jaguars games. The stadium is about a 5-minute drive from JU and traffic is good. And you can actually see the scoreboard, the big Jumbotron video screen from certain places on campus. So it's a cool place to watch the game, but I don't know what that's going to look like this year. We also have a ton of breweries, very large breweries like Anheuser-Busch, a huge multinational company that brews beer for all over the world. They have a huge brewery in Jacksonville that before all of this started did tours and you could go there and see the brewing process and stuff. And that was really cool. We also have really small breweries that are just in, converted old single family homes that are now doing microbrewing. And those are cool things that a lot of students who are of age like to go and partake. It's something that Jacksonville is known for. But that's going to be very different this year than it has been in years past. So just make sure that you're aware of what those processes and procedures are. We also have a really cool zoo, Jacksonville Zoo and Gardens. They do stuff around Halloween. They do stuff around Christmas. They have a big holiday lights attraction. So they have a lot of cool stuff. But if you're interested in going to a public attraction like that, make sure you check and see what the rules are about attendance and ticketing and COVID, because those are things that are very likely going to be affected by the pandemic. As I said, in terms of size, Jacksonville is a very large city. Large enough, in fact, that most people get around by car. Our public transport infrastructure isn't nearly as robust as it is in some larger cities. Even for an American city, it is not great. And I know that American public transport is often not great compared to public transport where you're from, but in Jacksonville specifically, it's especially, it suffers. So just make sure you account for that. Even if you don't own a car, you're probably going to do the majority of your off-campus travel by rideshare or taxi or a friend's car. Relying on public transport to travel large distances just doesn't work. I know that there's no scale on this map, so it's hard to tell exactly, but you can see JU is sort of right here in the middle. The Arlington neighborhood is around us. But then across the river, we have Springfield, which is a really cool historic neighborhood, something that not a lot of people know. Before TV, back in the silent film era of Hollywood, Jacksonville was a movie studio mecca, and there were a lot of movie studios and big movie stars lived in Jacksonville. And in Springfield, there are some really cool old buildings that used to be movie studio housing, and famous movie stars from the silent film era lived there. So that's a very cool neighborhood. Just south of Springfield is downtown. Downtown is where the sports stadiums are. In addition to the Jaguars, we also have the Jacksonville Jumbo Shrimp, a minor league baseball team, and the Jacksonville Sharks are an arena football, so an arena American football, indoor American football league. We also have basketball. A lot of times you'll see the NCAA tournament come through here in one of its rounds. We've got rugby, we've got soccer that's on and off depending on how the league is doing. So there's lots of stuff, and a lot of the sports gets played right there in downtown in a little sportsplex that's right across the river from JU. West of that is a new up-and-coming neighborhood called Brooklyn. There's lots of cool restaurants there. West of that, down the coast, is Riverside and Avondale. That's a sort of high-end boutique shopping district. There's a lot of really cool bars and nightclubs. There's a lot of cool restaurants that do all kinds of stuff. North of that is Murray Hill. That's another really cool up-and-coming neighborhood. There's a lot of parks there. My favorite coffee shop in the city is over in Murray Hill. So that's a neat place to go. But to drive from JU over to Murray Hill might take you 20 or 30 minutes by car. By bus, it might take you an hour to an hour and a half. Coming back to this side of the river, south of Arlington is the south side. And right over here where you see this shopping bag, that's the St. John's Town Center. It's a very large outdoor shopping mall. It's the nicer of the malls in the area. There's an Apple store there. There's a Lego store there, which, if you couldn't tell from all the Lego sets behind me, is where I spend most of my time in the town center. But there's also a ton of high-end dining and more affordable casual dining. And then probably the most popular attraction out at the beach, there's the beaches and Mayport. So up at the north end of all the beaches, there is Naval Station Mayport, which is a US Navy base. And then south of that, there are a ton of beaches. There's Neptune Beach, Jacksonville Beach, Atlantic Beach. And then south of that is TPC Sawgrass, which is where the PGA Tour Players Championship takes place every year. That's something that a lot of students go to. It's a very popular attraction. They didn't do it this year, or they canceled it part of the way through. But in future years, hopefully we'll be able to have that, and students will be able to go. And it's a really cool opportunity. In the past, some students have even been able to volunteer there. Some phrases you'll hear when you're around JU, around Jacksonville. So if you haven't figured it out already, JU is short for Jacksonville University. Very few people say the full name Jacksonville University all the time. They'll say JU. Jax is short for Jacksonville. Duval is Duval County. That's the county that Jacksonville is in. So the states, most of our US states are divided up into counties, and the counties have different cities in them, or towns or villages or what have you. So the city is Jacksonville, the county is Duval, and so you'll hear people say Duval. If you do make it to a Jaguars game while you're here, you'll definitely hear people chanting Duval. The avenues, the town center, and Regency are all shopping malls. Regency is the closest one. It's also a little area of shops and things that are in the immediate vicinity around the mall. There's a movie theater there that's pretty popular among students. The Avenues is a cool mall that is a little bit to the south of us that has some different stores than the town center. So depending on what store you want, if you want an indoor mall, the Avenues is probably, it's a little bit further away, but it's indoors more. The town center definitely has the most stores and the biggest selection, but if what you want isn't there, or if it's poor weather, you may not want to go to an outdoor mall. The beach and the beaches, obviously there is a beach, you know, sand and water, but there's also bars, nightclubs, restaurants, shopping. It's a cool neighborhood out there. It's not just the beach. I'm not a huge fan of like sitting on the beach, but I love going out to the beach because some of my favorite restaurants are over on the beach. In terms of buildings on campus, you might hear someone refer to the MSRI. That's the Marine Science Research Institute. It's a classroom building very close to the river. It's the big building with the big screened-in porch and all the garage doors close to the river. You can't miss it once you see it. But if you hear someone say MSRI, that's what they're referring to. DCOB, the building I mentioned earlier, is the Davis College of Business. It's a large classroom building. A lot of aviation and business classes take place there. It's very near the athletics fields. It's one of the few buildings that they abbreviate the name for often on campus. So if someone says DCOB or DCOB, that's what they're referring to. Swisher, the Swisher family were and still are benefactors of the university, and there's a lot of buildings named after the Swishers around campus. So if someone's talking to you and says, yeah, meet me at Swisher, they might be referring to a number of buildings. The basketball and volleyball gymnasium, where you would go to watch a basketball game, is the historic Swisher Gymnasium, often just called Swisher Gym. The library is Swisher Library, and there's also a classroom building, the Swisher Science Building. So if someone says, meet me at Swisher, make sure you clarify which one they're talking about. Otherwise, you'd just be waiting outside the gym for a long time. The CAF, or the cafe, refers to the Riverview Dining Hall. It's in the Kenny University Center, which people just call the Kenny Center, which you'll know because it's the building with Starbucks in it. But if someone says, meet me at the CAF, they're talking about the Riverview Dining Hall. It's a residential dining hall. It's all you care to eat. So you pay to go in, and then once you're in, there's a large selection of different foods for you to eat. There's usually vegan and vegetarian options, kosher, halal. There's sandwiches and pizza and salads and tons of different soda fountains and stuff. So it's a pretty cool place to go. It's where I eat lunch most days that I'm on campus. And so if someone's referring to the CAF, that's what they'll say, but you're not going to see the words the CAF on a campus map. So that's what that is. If you get in trouble, if you get lost, if you just need help, if you want to ask a question, almost anyone can help you. If you are encountering someone who has a 2-letter abbreviation for their word, so an RA or a DA or a TA or a GA or an OA, they all have the word assistant or advisor in there. So an RA is a resident assistant or a residential advisor. They will live in your building with you. If you're living on campus, they can answer questions about campus. They were selected from a large applicant pool to be a leader on campus, and they'll be able to help you out with any questions that you have. When you enter most classroom buildings or staff administrative buildings or even residential buildings, there'll be someone sitting at a desk. They are the desk assistant, the DA. They'll be able to help you. GAs and TAs are a little bit rarer. Most of our classes are taught by full-time faculty or adjunct faculty, but a TA is a teaching assistant who might be helping a professor teach a class. You can ask them questions. If you have a GA in housing within student life, there are a lot of people whose title is graduate assistant. They can help you. An office assistant, basically if someone has the word assistant in their name, they are there to assist you. There are also some 3- and 4-letter abbreviations for offices. So my office, International Student Services, or ISS. There's also the Student Counseling Center, the SCC. These are 2 places you can go for help, whether you just need to talk or ask questions or have very specific questions about your visa or just feeling homesick or whatever. The Counseling Center can help, I can help. There's also the International Student Association, which is a group of students, ISA. They're all international students or are interested in international students, and they meet regularly and they host cooking nights and they host big events, cultural days, learning opportunities. They do a ton of stuff on campus, and they're a really great resource. So if you're an international student, and if you're watching this, you probably are, check out the ISA. They're a really cool group of students. There's also SGA, which is Student Government or the Student Government Association. If you have questions about life at JU, or you want to change a policy, or you think it's not fair that something is happening the way it is, go talk to SGA. They're the ones who lobbied to get a Starbucks on campus. They do a lot of good work with leadership development. They're always looking for new students to join SGA. It's great on your resume. It's a great leadership development opportunity. So they're great. And then ODSS, or the Office of Disability Support Services, that's where you would go if, for instance, you injured yourself during the course of the year, you broke your leg, you can't go up and down stairs, and you need an accessible room that's going to allow you to not go up and down stairs in your building. You could talk to Disability Support Services, and they could give you an accommodation for a first floor room, or a room in a building with an elevator in it. The nice thing about JU is that it is a small campus, it's a small community. We're all family here. So if you have questions, just ask the person closest to you, and they will probably be able to help you, or at least send you in the direction of someone who can. In terms of personal space and physical contact, all of this is sort of pending what the rules are for COVID-19. Touching and distancing during COVID is probably, touching is a bad idea, distancing is a good idea. But generally speaking, post-COVID, Americans desire a little bit more personal space than a lot of other cultures. So if you have come to the US for the first time and you keep moving towards someone and they keep moving away from you, it's not a sign of disrespect. You might just be a little bit closer than they're comfortable with. Excuse me. When you're speaking to someone face to face, you probably don't want to be much closer than arm's length away. If you can reach out and touch them physically with your hand, you're probably standing closer than they're comfortable with. Before COVID, shaking hands is customary when meeting a new person, although now I think a wave or a head nod would be fine. Hugging is reserved for close friends, although I would not really hug many people right now, just based on the way that proximity enables transmission. But if you meet someone for the first time and try to hug them, they may be taken somewhat off guard by that. Touching someone's face or hair or shoulders or holding hands with them is typically reserved for very, very close friends or romantic relationships. If you're meeting someone for the first time, or you've only met someone a few times and you reach out and touch their face or hair, they might sort of back in surprise. It's very uncommon to do that. It's a very intimate act to hold someone's hand or to touch their face or hair or shoulders. Looking at someone directly in the eye is a sign of engagement. So if you're talking to someone and they are looking at you right in the eye and nodding, it's not a threatening act. It's not them being strange or unusual. It's a sign that they're listening to you. They're listening to what you said. They're engaged. They're not staring off into space. That's common. You don't necessarily have to reciprocate that, but if you do see someone who is looking directly at you, don't consider it disrespect. It's a sign of engagement. If you're living on campus, you will be sharing space with someone else. Even if you're in a single room, even if you're in a village apartment where you have your own bedroom, you're still going to be sharing some space, whether it's a kitchen or a bathroom or a living room or a common room or a hallway. All of the space on campus is not just yours. It's shared. So depending on your specific situation, if you're sharing a bedroom, as most of the students who live on our campus are sharing a bedroom, and someone, your roommate, leaves their belongings out, that is not an invitation for you to use these items. If there is a TV in your room, make sure you talk to the person whose TV it is. And if it's your TV and you don't want your roommate to use it, make that very clear to them. Because some things like TVs that are left out are often considered common property. Some things that are left out, like an Xbox or a Nintendo Switch, might be sort of halfway in between common property. But you might leave your laptop out on your desk, but that's not an invitation for your roommate to leave your laptop. So have those conversations. Make sure that you know whether what you're doing or what your roommate is doing is agreed upon by both parties beforehand. That's a really easy thing to talk about before it happens. If you wait until after, it can get complicated and confusing. Some students have a locking trunk called footlockers. This is common. It's not a reflection on you. That's just sort of a thing that a lot of students have. I remember when I went to college, my parents tried to buy me a locking trunk, a footlocker, to put at the foot of my bed and to lock like my computer in. And I told them I have no interest in locking my computer in a footlocker, because if it's locked in the footlocker, I can't use it. It's not something that is as common as it used to be, but it's still fairly common. And students have, locks on their desk maybe, or they might have a small safe where they keep important documents. This is not disrespectful. Please don't take it personally if your roommate shows up with a Foot Locker. It's not about you. It's just something that a lot of people choose to do. Speak to your roommate before using their items or eating their food. If you're in a room where you're sharing a bedroom with a roommate, you're probably limited to one mini fridge in the room. Um, Make sure that you know whose food is which, or if food is being bought, is this, hey, feel free to eat my mac and cheese, or hey, I paid for this mac and cheese, please don't eat it, or just ask me if you're going to eat it. Um, I worked in housing here at JU for 6 years. I can't tell you how many roommate mediations I had to oversee because someone was eating someone else's mac and cheese, or eating someone else's ramen, or eating someone else's cup noodles. Just talk to your roommate before using their items. And if they are using your items or eating your food, just tell them to stop or ask them politely to stop. Most of the time, that's all it takes. Um, if you're very close with your roommate, they might tell you it's okay to sit or lay on their bed, but that also might be seen as rude. Um, Again, the best way to combat the awkwardness of something like this happening is to talk to your roommate beforehand and set what those expectations are. Some roommates are so close that they share clothes. Some roommates are so distant that they don't really talk to each other. They just have, an imaginary line drawn in the middle of the room and they never step on each other's side. Most roommates are somewhere in the middle, but just talk to your roommate first before you do anything, and you're going to be better off for it, and so are they. If you're going to do something that makes noise, in public spaces, it's common and polite to use headphones. So if you're going to listen to music on your phone or watch a video on your phone or your computer, put headphones on. That's the most common and polite thing to do. If you approach someone wearing headphones, give them a moment to recognize that you're coming up and trying to talk to them. You may not realize, like I have a headphone in right now. So it's not always clear, especially now that wireless headphones are getting more and more common. So if someone's talking to you and you're wearing headphones, let them know, point, and then take it out. Or if you're on a phone call, tell them you're on a phone call. But if you're trying to talk to someone, they might be wearing headphones and you might not see that they're wearing headphones, so don't think it impolite. If you're in class or in a meeting with your RA or in another crowded space and your phone rings, depending on the situation, it might be impolite to take the call. So if you're in class and the phone rings, you should probably be paying attention to class. But if it's an important phone call and you have to take it, excuse yourself from the class before taking the call. If you're in a class, if you're in somebody's office and your phone rings and you just answer it and start talking to someone on the phone, they're going to think you probably pretty rude. TV video should be only loud enough for you to hear, but no louder. You don't necessarily have to wear headphones while you're watching TV, although wireless headphones are making that a lot easier. But if you're playing video through your TV or watching a TV, it should be loud enough for you to hear, but not loud enough for your roommate to hear, or loud enough for the people on the other side of the wall from you to hear. If you're watching TV with a group, make sure that the content is appropriate. There are TVs all over our residence halls, in lounges and lobbies. So if you're going to get together and watch something on TV, make sure it's something that's appropriate for everybody who might see it. If it's a large TV, there's big flat screens all over campus. It's polite to invite others to watch. So if you have a friend who likes something, you're trying to watch the same soccer match, and they try to sit down and watch with you, and you say like, "Oh, hey, can you back off? I'm trying to watch this." If it's on a big TV in a public space, you're going to be hard pressed to try to ask them to leave. It's polite to ask others to watch. If you're watching inappropriate or personal content, probably do it on your phone or your computer with headphones on, not necessarily on a large TV. I love my hour-long HBO dramas, my Game of Thrones, my Chernobyl, but that could be sensitive for some people, depending on what it is. So maybe don't watch that on like a large lobby TV. If you're going to watch something that might be inappropriate, watch it on your own, in your room, on your computer, or on a TV in your room, but not just like out in the world. Prayer, meditation, and religious practice. Students are encouraged to freely practice their religion, and other people should respect your beliefs and practice. But that respect goes both ways. You should respect other people's beliefs and practices. No student should infringe on another student's right to practice their religion, or to meditate, or to pray, or to be mindful in their room. You also shouldn't infringe on your roommate, or nor should they infringe on you. Your right to use your own room or to sleep in your own room. If your roommate is locking you out of the room on purpose often, or they're telling you, hey, don't come back to the room, I need the room for a while, have a conversation with them about it. If you feel like you need a place to to get away, to be alone, to practice. There is a meditation room in the Sam Marks Chapel, which is a building very near the Kennedy Center, which is where the cafeteria and the Starbucks are. And there's a special room that's set up that you can go into, close the door, have a space that's quiet and away from people to practice whatever you need to practice in there. There are also a ton of faith-based organizations on campus for a lot of different faiths and religions. And there are houses of worship in the community. Many of them are offering online practice of religion. So check with your local, just when you get here, if you're looking for a temple or a mosque or a church of a specific denomination, just search what the denomination is and then the zip code here, 32211, and you'll find churches and synagogues and mosques and temples and all kinds of stuff. It's a vibrant, rich community here in Jacksonville. And a lot of those houses of worship are doing online worship. So check out the JU coronavirus website and you can see a list of places that are doing online organized worship. Public spaces, people are expected to clean up after themselves. Waste should go into the correct receptacle. So if you produce trash or recycling, make sure you know what is recyclable and what's not. For instance, in Jacksonville, plastic bags are not recyclable, but plastic bottles, like the one I'm drinking from, are. So if you have one of these, make sure it's going in the recycling and not the trash. Littering, graffiti, and vandalism are discouraged and oftentimes illegal. If you throw trash from your car or from a moving car, you can be pulled over by the police and fined. If you graffiti on something or you deface something, you could be sent through the judicial process if you're on campus, and you could be caught up in a criminal proceeding if it's off campus. So don't deface property. It's no good. In places like the cafeteria or Chick-fil-A, just follow the convention. You should clear your place, but not clean your place. So like if you have a tray from a fast food restaurant, you should take the tray to the trash, throw the things that are trash in the trash, put the tray at the tray return. That's true in the cafeteria and Chick-fil-A as well. But you don't have to like get out a rag and start cleaning the table. The golden rule, I was in Boy Scouts, and so the golden rule there was leave a place better than how you found it. So if there's a piece of trash on your table when you get there, just throw it away when you leave. Don't leave it, or certainly don't add to it. In terms of weather, Jacksonville is very hot in the summer and pretty mild in the winter. It's never going to be like cold. You can see here, this is the average highs and average lows. Record highs and record lows can get hotter or lower respectively, but you can see in the winter months, so in December, January, February, it might only crack 20°C during the day. In June, July, August, September, May, it often is hotter than 30°C during the day. So it's pretty hot during the day most of the year. In terms of how cold it is at night, it's very rare that we'll have a sub-0 degree night. Most of the time, even in the coldest nights, you might have one night a year that gets down to 2°C or into the 30s Fahrenheit. But typically your lows in the winter are going to be in the 40s, your lows in the spring are going to be in the 50s, and your lows in the summer are going to be in the 70s. I mean, today, on my weather app on my phone, the next several days in a row, the high is between 90 Fahrenheit, so about 32 Celsius, and 92, so 33 Celsius, so like in the low to mid 30s Celsius. And the lows are all about 23, 24 Celsius for the next several days. And that's probably going to be true for the next several months, honestly. So make sure you dress accordingly, depending on where you're coming from. If you're coming from Norway, you might think that it's very silly that people wear big fur-lined jackets here in the winter. If you're coming from Ecuador, you might think that it's totally reasonable that people are wearing fur-lined jackets. Dress what's comfortable for you. People who have lived in Florida for a long time get used to the hot, and we get unused to the cold. And so it can suddenly seem very cold, and you're just like, it's not even 0°C. Why are you wearing, a parka? It's pretty common. You'll see it a lot. You'll also see people wearing shorts in that weather, whatever's comfortable for you. Speaking of, in terms of dress is an expression of your personality. And so you'll see all kinds of stuff. Some students will wear what I'm wearing to class, a tailored shirt, a tie, a jacket. Some students will wear t-shirts and shorts or flip-flops or pajama pants to class. these are fine. As long as dress is appropriate and acceptable and whatever that means to you, um, then it's fine. If your dress is purposefully offensive, then you might have a problem, but typically, don't be offended by other people's dress. They will not typically be offended by yours. Make sure you dress comfortably and make sure you use masks and protective equipment when instructed, especially in places like labs or classrooms where you're going to be in closer proximity to other people. Masks are going to be required over a lot of campus, so just make sure you're aware of that. In terms of hygiene, I will say these are general guidelines for common grooming practices and how frequently they typically take place here. This is not the end all be all. This is not the perfect guide. Use this as a general guiding principle. For instance, the first thing, showering. Once a day or once every other day, or if you're exercising often, if you're on the soccer team and you're doing 2-a-day practices, you might need to shower twice a day. That's fine. If you're going to the gym, shower after the gym, that's fine. If you're showering far more or far less often than this, that's not necessarily wrong, but you might get some funny looks from people. Your roommate might ask you about it. It would be outside of what we consider the norm, but again, that doesn't mean it's right or wrong, but just so that you're aware. If you're showering 5 times a day, you might get questions about that. If you're showering once every 2 weeks, you might get questions about that. Washing your hair, pretty wide range on this one. Some people wash their hair every day. Some people wash it once a week, and some people wash in between, but once a day to once a week, I'd say is a baseline. Brushing your teeth 3 times a day to once a day. Washing your hands, typically, I would say several times a day, before and after meals and after using the restroom. Now I'd say probably more than that. And there will be hand sanitizer all over campus. Just remember that hand sanitizer is not a replacement for 20 seconds of hand washing with warm soapy water, but it can be used in a pinch. If you carry a little bottle of hand sanitizer around and you have to pick something up off the floor and throw it away and you sanitize after, that's not a bad practice to be in, but don't let hand sanitizer replace hand washing. Using deodorant once a day or more if needed. Basically, if you shower, you might put on deodorant. And then guidelines for room cleanliness, and this is true whether you're on campus or off campus. You should probably clean the floor, whether that's sweeping or vacuuming, about once a week. You should probably clean up spills or trash. I mean, if you knock your trash can over, clean it up right away. Don't let it get on the floor. If you spill something, like I said, I worked in housing for 6 years. I've seen what happens when somebody spills a cup of juice and then doesn't clean it up for a week or several weeks, and it's not good. So if you spill something, clean it up immediately. Dishes and cookware, depending on where you are. If you're someplace like Oak Hall, where you don't necessarily have a dedicated kitchen, you might need to clean up immediately. Oak Hall also has a shared lobby kitchen, which you're going to want to clean up immediately because it's a shared kitchen and you can't just leave your things there. If you live in an apartment, you might be able to just run the dishwasher when it gets full. But just make sure you're being respectful of the other people around you who you're sharing that with. All kitchens on campus are shared kitchens, even if it's just with 2 or 3 other people. It might be with a couple hundred other people if it's a floor kitchen or a building kitchen. Cleaning your bathroom. If you're in North Hall, Williams Hall, or Botts Hall, the bathrooms are cleaned for you. If you're in Oak, the apartments are off campus once a week, I'd say minimum. You probably want to talk to your roommates about if that's going to be one person's job or you're going to split it up, or if one of you is going to clean the sinks and one of you is going to clean the showers and one of you is going to clean the toilet. But make sure that you are making that schedule, because if you assume that they're going to do it and they assume that you're going to do it, you could go the whole semester without cleaning it, and that could get pretty gross. Again, these can vary based on a lot of factors, including what you're used to and what your culture is. You might not wash your hair every day. You might never wash and shampoo your hair. You might use dry shampoo. You might use other things that your roommate is not really sure about. These are good conversations to have. These are great learning opportunities, but just make sure that if you have a concern about somebody's cleanliness or hygiene, that you confront them about it, not angrily, but talk to them about it. That's the biggest takeaway that I hope you get from this, is that you can talk to somebody directly about any problem. If your roommate is upsetting you and they're using your things, you can talk to them, and they should be able to talk to you. If you feel like your roommate may not smell the greatest, you can talk to them and they might talk to you about that. Those are never fun conversations to have. They can sometimes be very awkward, but that's part of what being in college is learning to have those hard conversations, learning to talk to people in ways that are really important for life, but that are sometimes hard to learn how to do. Food, All students who live on campus have a meal plan. So you have your Riverview Dining Hall, you also have your, or the CAF, and you have some commercial dining options. We have a Chick-fil-A on campus, a Starbucks, a couple other little dining options. You can also cook food. Kitchens at JU are pretty common. If you're in the apartment, your apartment has a kitchen. If you're in another building, you'll have at least one kitchen per building. Just make sure that you clean up after yourself. One of the things that we do sometimes deal with, some food that you buy in the US is markedly different than what you'd buy at home. For instance, one of the most common examples is eggs. Eggs in the US are treated in such a way when they're processed that they have to be refrigerated. You can't leave eggs out on the counter. There's a coating that protects them that is stripped off during the cleaning process here that's different than it is in most other countries. So if you buy eggs and leave them out, they are probably going to go bad, and if you eat them, you may get sick. The best way to deal with this is to look at what you buy. For instance, if you're buying eggs, they're going to be refrigerated when you buy them. So they should probably be kept refrigerated when you store them. If something is refrigerated or frozen when you buy it, it should be kept refrigerated or frozen when you get it home. And if something is bought at room temperature, look at it. For instance, my favorite hot sauce, sriracha sauce. When you buy it at room temperature, but then when you open it, it says keep refrigerated. So I keep mine in the fridge. Here in the US for buying food, there's very small like corner grocery stores and very large mega stores. Some of the popular brands here in Florida, Publix is one, Winn-Dixie is one. Aldi is a pretty common one that they might have where you're from. There is an Aldi here. There are Aldis in the United States and in Jacksonville. A lot of people do their grocery shopping at large mega stores, mega marts like Walmart or Target. There's lots of different options, but there's very few like corner grocers. You're also probably not going to go to a bespoke bakery or a bespoke butcher. You're probably going to get most of your food at a single place if you're grocery shopping. That's the nice thing about the meal plan, is that you don't really have to worry about it. Eating in restaurants, be prepared that eating in restaurants is probably going to look different than what you're used to, and it's going to look different for everyone right now because of COVID. The one thing that I will say that a lot of people are very surprised by, your local food will probably taste very different here than it does at home. If you go to a Mexican restaurant in the United States, you're probably much more likely to get what we call Tex-Mex than authentic Mexican cuisine. If you go to a Thai restaurant, you're not going to get the same food that you would at home in Thailand. You're not going to get your grandmother's plantains at a Ghanaian restaurant. You're going to get an Americanized version of most foods. So your local food may taste very different here, but there are lots of different styles of restaurants. There are lots of different types of cuisine, but there's also different types of restaurants. So there are some restaurants that are very fancy and you need a reservation far in advance, and you go in and sit down and you're served a multi-course meal that could cost you in the neighborhood of several $100s per person per meal. There are also restaurants where you go in, you walk up to a counter, you pay for your food, they give you a tray with your food on it, and you go and sit down, and there's no wait staff at all. And there's stuff, you know, all the way in between. You could go out to eat to a fast food restaurant and spend $5 on a meal, or you could go out to eat at a very nice restaurant and spend $200 on your meal. Make sure you research that before you go. And also keep in mind, we talked about taxes earlier. Taxes are usually not included in prices listed on menus. Neither is service charges or tipping. In the US, wait staff at restaurants are usually paid less than what the federal minimum wage is, with the expectation that they will make money from tips. A tip is a 15 to 20, sometimes more, sometimes less, depending on the situation. It's given on top of what your total bill for your food is. It's expected and customary for service. Some places will say like tipping is not required. That's usually a platitude. Most places that say tipping is not required, the people who work there are going to expect tips. The only exception I can think of is, for instance, at a grocery store where someone is taking your cart to your car for you. They're helping you load the groceries. Some places will say tipping is not allowed. That's very different. But if you're someplace where there's a tip line on a restaurant, at a restaurant, there's a tip line on the receipt, or there's a tip jar, then tipping is probably expected, and part of the workers' pay who are working there is coming directly from tips. And so if you don't tip them, they're not getting paid a living wage. So make sure you account for that. If you look at a menu someplace and see that an entree costs $10, and you luck in $10 in hand, you're not going to be able to cover the tax, let alone the tip. So make sure you prepare for that before you go. And your friends who you make here will get you used to that really quick. In terms of communication, formal communications come from the university, are usually done by email, sometimes by telephone, but check your email every day because that's where official communication is going to come from. Informal communication, you may call on the phone or FaceTime or GroupMe or WhatsApp. I mean, maybe you communicate only by TikTok. I don't really know anymore. I try to stay young by keeping around a group of young people, keeping around my students. But you're not going to get a WhatsApp chat from JU telling you something important. So you still have to check your email every day. Even if you're not sending a ton of emails like to your friends, you'll be getting from professors, you'll be getting emails from administrators, and that's often important and time-sensitive information. So make sure you're aware of that. Emails and phone calls to JU offices are usually answered within 1 business day. So if you send me an email at 10 a.m. today, it would be customary for you to give me until 10 a.m. tomorrow to respond. If you need a response sooner than that, make that clear in the communication. You can mark an email as urgent, and you can say, hey, I know this is last minute. I apologize. I need a letter, and I need it today, if at all possible. I'm so sorry for the inconvenience. And recognize that if you're asking for that, most offices will do their best to try to accommodate, but it might not be possible. So just be aware. In terms of scheduled meetings, make sure you're a few minutes early, but not too early. This can be a delicate balance for some people to find. For instance, if you have a class that starts at 10 a.m., if you get there at 9 a.m., not only are you going to be very early and spending a lot of time just sitting around, there's probably going to be another class in that classroom and they're not going to want you in it. If you arrive 5 minutes before, that's pretty normal. If you arrive right on time, your professor might have already started speaking, and so they may think that you're coming in late. It's very unlikely that you're going to walk in and take your seat right as the clock ticks from 9:59 to 10. So it's better to be a little bit early than a little bit late. If you're very late, it can be considered rude. If you are very, very late, for instance, if you schedule a meeting with me at 10 and at 9:50 that you're not going to be there until 10:30, send me an email or, a text or a chat, however we're communicating, to let me know that you're going to be late, because I have other work that I can be doing, and that's true of most people too. Showing up late is considered pretty rude, and the later you are, the less considerate it typically is. Resources. If you don't know where to go, just ask whoever's closest. If they don't know the answer, they'll find somebody who does, or they'll point you in the right direction. If you live on campus, ask your RA or ask your housing office. There's an office in every building. You can ask anyone who works there. Ask the desk assistant. If it's immigration stuff, you can ask me or Miss Terry. If you just have general questions and you need to talk to somebody about being homesick or adjusting, you can talk to the student counseling center. If you have a question about something for someone, if you have an issue with something your professor said and you feel comfortable doing it, I'd encourage you to speak directly to that person. If you take issue with something that I've said, please come directly to me. We're here to help. Nobody is at JU because they want to make people feel bad or feel less than. We're here because we want to help you. We want to help you grow and learn. And so if you have a question or concern about me, you can come directly to me about it. I hope that I and others at JU are creating a community where that is not only acceptable, but expected. Again, if you have any questions, I would encourage you to send them to me via email. This is the best way to reach me. So my email, again, lrattin@ju.edu. That's my telephone number. If you have a working US phone or you have Google Voice or something like that, you can call that and leave a message and I'll be back in touch. But that's all I have for the presentation. Again, feel free to contact me with questions. And on behalf of everyone at JU and everyone on the orientation team, thank you so much for watching this. We look forward to having you as part of the JU family, whether that's on campus in the fall, on campus at a later time like the spring, or virtually until you can get your visa. If you're watching this, you're part of the JU family, and we can't wait to meet you and can't wait to have you as part of our family. So thank you so much.